Hey there and greetings. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph and I am the host of this show. A show that has dedicated itself to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other forms of rock music. So we are on our Wednesday night favorites. And for those of you who recall, we did part A of my masterpiece albums last week. Albums that have reached master status with me. So there's 48 in total. We've done the first 24. So we're up to number 24 coming up. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'll continue with the countdown from album number 24 all the way to album number 1. And I'll do the same as I did with the first part of this series where I went from 48 to 25. I just reiterated them from top to bottom, and I'll do the same thing here. So this is really the cream of the crop for me. The first set of albums were really good and I love them a lot, but these ones are really the cream of the crop. These are my 24 favorite albums of all time, probably, in most regards. Most of them, I'm just looking down the list here, most of them have been around for 40 plus years for me and have been in my life for that long. A few of them have been, I wouldn't be surprised if I played over 1,000 times in my history. Yeah, there's at least one like that. It's been around for 47 years, I would say. Yeah, early on, I played that death out of this album. I don't know how it survived, to be honest with you. Or both of them. It was a double album. Okay, so we're going to get started now. So for those of you who like progressive rock and hard rock, you're going to get a lot of that today. Okay, so we're going to start by doing the first album on the set, an album which is my favorite by this group. And it's just a perfect album in every regards. There they are. I was just looking for my glasses. I always realize that I need my glasses when I go to look at something and I can't see anything. Getting old is a bitch, isn't it? Okay, so anyways, we're talking about this album by heart. I'm going to try and hold them on this side today. Let's see if I can do it. If I can get myself to do it. Maybe we're better off to just do this. Just do this. Okay, so there we are. This is Heart's Dreamboat Annie. There they are, Ann and Nancy Wilson. Okay, this was the debut album of these girls and the rest of the band. Really, really good album. Some real top shelf tracks. I'm looking at this side one. Magic Man, Crazy on You, and Dreamboat Annie. 3 of their best tracks ever. The second side, which I didn't like as much when I first heard it when I was younger, and I've been listening to this album for probably since the mid-80s, so about 37, 38 years. But the second side, White Lightning and Wine, Sing Child, How Deep It Goes, and Dreamboat Annie Reprise, all really, really good songs. Probably Sing Child is probably my what do you call it, my underdog song, or deep cut song. I love that song. I think it's one of the best of their collection. Yeah, I love the cover. Look how sweet looking those girls are. That didn't come out right, sorry. They're just magical, the two of them together, musically, in every way. So there you are, Heart's Dreamboat Annie. Okay, the next album up comes from a band who, when I bought this album and was playing it all the time, were my favorite band. And they stayed that way probably from about 1983 through to almost the birth of my daughter. So about 18 years they were my favorite band, edging out my favorite band, which is Rush now. But it was a good 18 years they were number one. and it's this album, Fragile, by the rock band Yes. This was probably my favorite Yes album for a good part of that history, for maybe about half of that time period. Roundabout, maybe one of the most overplayed Yes songs, but still really good track. South Side of the Sky, one of the best deep cuts of any album, and then you have Long Distance Runaround and Heart of the Sunrise. Those are the big tracks on the album. But all the smaller stuff, Cans and Bombs, we have Heaven, 5% for Nothing, The Fish, and The Mood for a Day, which are all kind of little tracks done by each member of the band, are all pretty solid, like really interesting stuff. I really like We Are Heaven. That's probably my favorite of all of them. But of course, Mood for the Day is the one that I learned to play on guitar, or at least I got to a point where I could play some of it. Really difficult song. Anyways, there you have it. Fragile, Fragile by Yes, coming in at number 23. At number 22, a kind of a newcomer to this collection. Probably only been a master album for about a year or so. Deserves it in every way. Is the only master album by this guy. And he's just recently made it to my group of 8, and that is this album, Peter Gabriel Iii, or Melt if you prefer. So on this album, like I've done did a recent look back at this album if you want to really listen to some more about it. But basically, I don't remember. Games Without Frontiers and Biko are my big songs on this. But also No Self-Control and Lead a Normal Life are really good too. There's really no bad tracks on here. Maybe originally I didn't really like Family Snapshot, but now it's the one I find myself listening to the most for some reason. But anyways, really solid album from top to bottom. Well deserving of a master rating here. I'm trying to find the best way to put this on here, and I'm not doing a very good job now. And now I move my head, right? Okay, anyways. Peter Gabriel coming in at number 22. Okay, so number 21 is this album. Another recent comer to this Mastercraft. It's only been a master album for about maybe 2 years now. Just such a great album. I love the energy of this album. This album should have done better when it came out, but because of the record label, it kind of didn't quite do what it should have done. Unfortunately, the guitar player left, but was replaced by Tommy Shaw. That's a pretty good deal. Tommy Shaw's not on this album. It's the only Styx album from that period where he came on. He wasn't on, but it has like some real classic Styx on here. Light Up, Lorelei, one of my favorite tracks, The Lonely Child. Born for Adventure, also another big track for me. And of course the epic Sweet Madam Blue, all great. And the prelude part to that is pretty good as well. Maybe Mother Dear might be the only song that I'm not overly crazy about on. It's probably the weakest track, but not a terribly weak song. There's no real bad songs on this album. And to be honest with you, I really love the cover quite a bit too. This is one of the very best rock albums from its time period. And it's released in 75 too, so a very long time ago. So there you have it. Styx's Equinox, or Equinix if you prefer it that way. Okay, so then we come to number 20, which is an album that has a pretty lengthy history with me. I think I got it in the late 80s, early, maybe 88 or 89. It might have been in 89. I got it when one summer afternoon, and I took it with me to when I was in New Zealand, and it was the only album I took with me, and I played it the whole time I was there. and I grew to love the album and all the cuts on it. I even like the video with the singer and the funny guy that he put on there with him. Anyways, this is Graceland by Paul Simon. The Boy in the Bubble, Graceland, I Know What I Know, Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, You Can Call Me Al, Under the African Skies, All Around the World, and The Myth of Fingerprints. I love all of those tracks. The tracks I didn't list, Gumboots and Homeless. Was it Homeless or Crazy Love 2, Volume 2? I like them both though. There's no bad tracks on this album. It wouldn't make it up this level if it had like anything really bad on it. So almost a perfect album. And Paul Simon's at his best here. I like Paul Simon quite a bit. I like his voice. I like his storytelling, the way he chooses to put his music together. It's different than a lot of musicians, and for that I appreciate it. So there it is, Paul Simon's Graceland. Coming in at number 20. So now we're in the top 20. And these are really, really good albums. The next 9 albums, some of them have come in, some of them have gone out, but they've been pretty solid. And they're all really good albums. Albums that I will find myself listening to. And so while they're not as burned out as the top 10, but the top 10, even though they're burned out, still have a lot of goodness to them. So we're going to talk first about number 19, an album that has mixed feelings from people. Some people really don't like the quality of this album or the production sound of it. Some people hate the artwork on it. And those same people put this down as one of the 10 worst albums of all time. But all those things aside, I think they're wrong. I think that the songs on here are as good as anything this group has put out. They're really strong. The vocalist, this is a mix of two legendary bands, and the vocalist, I think, did his best performance on this album of anything I've heard him do. And this is an album totally unexpected, and that's Born Again by Black Sabbath. Yeah, I know people hate the cover and they think it's tacky, and you take some hits for this and everything, but really, really solid album. There is like lots of really good tracks on here. Digital Bitch, Disturbing the Priest, Trashed, Zero the Hero. It just goes on. Like, it's just, there are no bad songs on here. Even the songs I really didn't initially like at the beginning, I really like a lot now. Like Born Again, another great track. I missed that. The Dark is good. Hotline and Keep It Warm, two of the last tracks. Two songs I didn't really listen to much. Keep It Warm is probably one of my favorite tracks on this album now. And I kind of like the cover. I think it's kind of creepy. It's very Black Sabbath-ish, I think. So, anyways, coming in number 19, Born Again, Black Sabbath. Okay, coming in at number 18. This album could have been up a little bit higher than this one, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. The next 5 are all so close. I originally had them arranged differently, and I changed them around a bit, and then I changed them around again. But I had to have one of them that I wanted where it is, and then I didn't want it there because I didn't think it earned it. So I changed them all. These next 5 was like that. But this one probably could go higher at any given day. When it was out, it was like a master album for me. We're almost at the beginning, and it had to wait its years to get turned in, but it got in. And that's Jethro Tull's Minstrels in the Gallery. Minstrels in the Gallery, A Cold Wind of Valhalla, Black Satin Dancer. Fantastic tunes, top shelf tunes, all 3 of them. Requiem, I don't mind that one too much. One White Duck or Nothing at All. That is one of the deep cuts on this album. I love that song. Baker Street Muse doesn't get enough attention. I think it's one of the best Jethro Tull songs of all time. Grace, pretty good track. Well, and then this one comes with some bonus tracks, as all Jethro Tull albums do. And one of them, Summer Day Sands, is one of my favorite Tull songs as well. March of the Mad Scientist, Pan Dancer, Minstrel in the Gallery Live, and Cold Wind of Valhalla Live. Yeah, this is just a really solid album. Lots of really good instrumentation on this album. Very strong vocals. Well orchestrated, well put together album. Minstrels in the Gallery. Love it. Could eventually be my favorite Jethro Tull album. I'm pretty sure it will eventually. It just keeps going up. It's that good. Okay, the next one comes from my favorite rock band. This album has fallen a little bit on hard times lately, and that's why I was moving it around a bit. But there's 2 tracks on this album that are better than anything on Minstrel in the Gallery, I think. So that's why it's here where it is. And that's A Farewell to Kings and Xanadu, the first 2 tracks on Rush's Farewell to Kings album. Close to the Heart, it's not a bad song. It's a good radio song, but I don't really care if I hear it anymore, to be honest with you. Cinderella Man's one of my favorites on here. A little bit burned out. I probably played it a lot. And Madrigal, if that's how you want to say it. There's another way of saying it, but I've never been able to say it that way, so I don't. And Cygnus X1, which is a song that I did not like. I never listened to it for years, and then I seen them in a live concert playing it, and I started listening to it, and now I like it quite a bit. It's moved up quite a bit. Like, it's probably in the top 4 on this album now. But it's the strength of Farewell to Kings and Xanadu and Cinderella Man, those 3 songs that really make this album so good. Plus, I really like this cover quite a bit. This album is somewhat different sounding, as all Rush albums are very different sounding, but this one, there's no album that sounds quite like this one. Even the Hemispheres album, which it has book 2 of this, is a lot heavier than this sounding. Anyways, really solid album. Some people, some dedicated Rush people, that feel that this is the best Rush album, but I'm not going to argue with them. I love it a lot. So that's number 17. Number 16, this album, Black Sabbath's Master of Reality. This could have fallen to 17th. I don't play it as much as I used to, but it is really some really dark and heavy stuff on this. This may be the heaviest Sabbath album, at least of the original set. It's hard to read. It's kind of, I mean, when you have an album with Sweet Leaf, After Forever, and Children of the Grave, you're not hurting at all. I don't mind Embryo. It's a little cute little part that goes well. It really suits the beginning of Children of the Grave. Orchid is good. It's the same kind of thing for Lord of the World. Lord of This World and Into the Void are 2 deep cuts on this. But probably my favorite track on this album over the last decade or so is Solitude. I know it's a depressing, deep, dark, heavy song, but I just really like it a lot. So there you go. Masters of Reality, Black Sabbath. Next up, number 15. I originally had this 17, but then I was looking at it. It is better production than Masters of Reality and Minstrels in the Gallery. That wasn't meant as rhyme, but it did. And but it just, I had to put it up higher for the reason that it's just like it's just a heavy, really well done and well vocaled album. I think it's the best by quite a bit. I know other people disagree. They like the first one or they like the third one, but this one's my favorite. Fair Warning. Fair Warning has the 2 big tracks that everybody always knows, Unchained and Mean Street. I like those 2 songs a lot, but they're not my favorite on the album. My favorite on the album is Push Comes to Shove. I also like hear about it later. Sinner Swing is really good. The only song on this album that is a little bit of a weak sister for me is So This Is Love. It's kind of a poppy ballad. I'm not really crazy about it. It's probably the only kind of weak song on a lot of these albums. There's not very many of them that have weak songs, but this one I'm not really a big fan of. But anyways, there you go. Van Halen, Fair Warning, coming in at number 15. And the other album that was part of this group of that I kept moving around, and this one started out at the bottom of the list and ended up at the top, because I kept saying, I like this better than that one, and I like this one better than that one, I like this better than that one. I ended up just putting it top. One of the guys on my one of my subscribers was talking about this album, and it just kept sticking in my head. This is such a good album, and it's not burned out even slightly, and it's growing all the time, and it's already up to now number 14. This should make my top 10, eventually knocking some of those ones that are getting a little burned out. But we're telling Selling England by the Pound by Genesis. Great album, one of the classic albums of all time. I think it's the best of the Peter Gabriel era by quite a bit, actually. Dancing with the Moonlit Night, I love that tune. I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe. It's a very different kind of song, but it's so catchy. I find myself humming it all the time. First of Fifth, one of the best Genesis songs, I think. It's up there in the top 10 for me, I'm sure of it. More Fool Me is the one weak track on this album. I don't really care for that Phil Collins vocal thing. This is not a song that I'm into. Battle of Epping Forest, I love that track. It's probably for a long time was my favorite track on the album, or close to it. After the Ordeal is good. Cinema Show is probably my favorite, and has probably always been my favorite on this album. And I seen Steve Hackett do a version of it live, which I thought was just amazing. And Isle of Plenty is, of course, okay as well. So this is a strong album featuring all of them, all 5 of them. Great album. Selling England by the Pound, coming in at number 14. So now the next 3 all switched around. The one at the bottom was at the top, and the one at the top was in the middle, and then the one in the middle was down at the bottom. I switched them around. Most likely for a reason that the one in the middle has been growing with me for the last 2 years. It just keeps getting stronger and stronger. It's actually moved ahead of a couple albums that it was perennially behind, but it's now right up there. And I'm thinking it's going to crack that. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being my favorite album by this group, and that's going to be a big surprise, because it's always been this one particular album has always been the big album for me for this group. But we'll get to that in a minute. Now we're going to talk about this one, coming in at number 13, the Yes album. An album that grew quite a bit for a while there, and it's kind of fallen a little bit on hard times. For me, I guess it's just I used to have this tendency to play something to death, and then I burn it out, and then it has a real hard time coming back. I don't do that now. What I generally do is when I find something has got to a pinnacle part, I'll take it off and then leave it for a while and go back to it, because I don't want my music to be like that. That's part of the reason why I don't listen to the radio, because they'll just kill certain songs and you just never want to hear them again. So on this album, Yours Is No Disgrace, Starship Trooper, and Perpetual Change, all among the very best Yes songs, I think, out there. The other 3 songs, I've Seen All Good People suffers from radio abuse, and it wasn't that great of a track to begin with. I think it's been overplayed and overkilled. Not a terrible track, but just I don't think it's in the same league as these other 3. The Clap Nice little acoustic bit. I actually liked Mood for the Day better at one point, but I think I like this version better. It's more bouncy and more lively. And of course, Adventure, which is an okay track. It's never been a huge track with me, but I've never disliked it. Kind of reminds me of Different Strings from Rush. Not that they're anything similar in sounding, but that's just the same kind of niche it fills, I guess. And of course, I really love Starship Trooper and Yours Is No Disgrace. Those two are just make this album, I think. So that's number 13. This was originally an 11, almost made it to the top 10. It's kind of fallen on a little bit of hard times. Now we're getting to the second stack. Ooh, I almost lost those. That wouldn't have been good. Anyways, we're at the second stack now, the top 12. So coming in at number 12, an album that probably, if I'd done this before I started this channel about a year ago, would have probably been maybe 25th or 28th, but it's just continued to rise. And I mean, I loved it then, but now I just really love it, and that's this album, Hemispheres. I think the difference is that I've always loved La Villa Strangiato, I've always loved The Trees, and I've always loved Circumstance. I love them all. The big difference now with this album is that I really like the Hemispheres too quite a bit. It's quite loud, and the production is really good, and there's lots of stuff going on in it too. Of course, the album is really probably underrated. It didn't do well when it first came out, and they worked damn hard on this album, and it probably pushed themselves to their absolute limits. So instrumentation wise, it's probably their best album, but for this purposes of my show, which I like quite a bit, it's coming in at number 12 on my list. Hemispheres by Rush. Okay, next up we have an album that will probably surprise some people that it's gone this high. It surprised me because it's slowly creeped up and up and up and over the years. It was the last of their albums that I bought, but it was the one that I love the most, and we're talking about, oh yeah, and this album was called this as a Yes put out their Fragile, and they put out their Not Fragile. Yeah, and it isn't fragile. This is very heavy, maybe their heaviest, with the best material that they put out ever. Every song on this album is a game changer, breaking. I love all 9 tracks on here, with Not Fragile and Rock Is My Life being my two favorite. Rock Is My Life, This Is My Song. Those are my 2 favorite tracks on the album. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet is one of my top favorite tracks. Then you got the other side with Sledgehammer, Blue Monin, Secondhand, and Give It All Away. Classic, perfect side of an album. Just, really good. The only song on here that's a little bit weak in my estimation is Freewheelin'. It's probably like a 7, and the rest of them are probably 9s and 10s. Roll On Down the Highway's a 9, but Freewheelin's probably the weakest track. But this is a heavy, pounding album, hard rock at its best. This is the group at its pinnacle. I love the cover of the thing. I love all the songs. The song rocks from start to finish. Yeah, Not Fragile, unlike Fragile. Okay, so we come up now to the top 10. And we start out with a live album, coming in at 10th. The first album I ever owned. Played the crap out of it. Probably the one album on this list that I'd probably listened to more than any other album in history. Maybe not the most listened to song. I think that probably belongs to Xanadu, but for purposes of listening to an entire album at a time, this one, at one time I would play this 10 times a day. Easy. For the first year, I probably played it. I don't think I'm exaggerating if said I played this 400 or 500 times the first year I had it. I played it so much. We're talking about this album, Kiss Alive. Now this particular one I bought a few years back, and I didn't listen to it much. My friend borrowed it and I got it back. Obviously he took good care of it, though. It's in good shape. I love the cover of this album. I love this part at the back. I don't know how many times I've had people claim to know these people. These people probably know more people than the guys in Kiss, right? Anyways, it's just it's a heavy, hard rock, crunching, bordering in some places on metal album. And just some iconic riffs here. This is a legendary album, I think. Even though it's you can say what you want that it's not really a live album, that they added all that in. Whether it was really a live album or not, doesn't matter. The music is fantastic, and this is most of the songs on here, I believe, are the definitive version of the songs. So there you go, Kiss Alive from 1975, coming in at number 10. And we're going back to the same group. I think that happened one other time. Yeah, with Yes, but they did Tornado and Drama. But this is my favorite Kiss album. As strange as that seems, it's just continued to get better and better over the years. When I first played it, and like all the other ones in the set, it would never have gotten ahead of any of like Destroyer or Rock and Roll Over or Hotter Than Hell or any of them. But over time, it continues to get more and more, continue to get stronger and stronger, to the point now where it's the number one Kiss album for me. And it's because it never burns out. I could listen to this day, and sometimes I did. I used to have it in my car. I'd listen to it when I got in the car on the way to work. I'd listen to it on the way home. Everywhere I went, I played this album. So much so that I forgot to take the disc out of the box, and now it's in my car somewhere in a junk pile. Anyways, I'll have to get it again because I can't live without this album. To me, it's the best Kiss album. You know, it's even better than Alive. When it's pretty close, but it's better than Alive, I think. Next up, Fly By Night by Rush. Long been one of my favorite albums. It was the first Rush album I ever listened to in its entirety. I rented it from the library for 3 weeks and played a lot, and then didn't listen to it for a long time. When I started collecting Rush albums, my first one was Permanent Waves. And then shortly after that, this became the second one. And I love the cover, and the songs on this are like really strong. It's kind of a weird album in one sense. It has the songs I liked initially: Anthem, Fly By Night, and Making Memories. And in the end, those were the four songs I liked the most at the beginning, and then it kind of drifted from them to Best I Can, Beneath, Between, and Behind, and By Toward the Snow Dog. I call it the 3 Bs. And then after that, it's just kind of back and forth with different songs. But the one track that's never been a huge hit with me is Rivendell, but that's because it's a soft track. But some people complain it doesn't really fit on this album at all, but I think it does. Rush was very experimental on this album at the beginning, because it has some of what sounds like their first album and some of what's going to sound like their next couple of albums. They little bits off of both of them that are mixed in here. So Rivendell was the beginnings of the progressive movement, along with By Tor and the Snow Dog. So you had some progressive here, some hard rock, some bluesy kind of elements as well. So, but the album itself overall has stood up well over time for me. I would play this quite a bit for a while there when I went through a period of time, probably from about 2006 till about 2009, where I barely was listening to anything but Rush. And kind of reminiscent of the way I was with Kiss at the beginning. Yeah, so number 8, Fly By Night. Okay, we're now into the top 7. These are all pretty much perfect albums. There's nothing on any of them that I can think of that's coming to mind right now that isn't great. This album, Genesis, Trick of the Tail has been as high as 6th before. But every track on this is great. At different times, I've loved every track on this. Probably, if a gun was put to my head and I could only choose one song, it would probably be Ripples. If I had to cast one song off the album, it would probably be the last one, Los Endos. Only because I'm not a huge instrumental fan, so I wouldn't want to lose the rest of the vocal ones. But like really good. Entangled is a really fantastic song. Madman Moon, Robbery, Assault and Battery, and Ripples. Those are probably the 4 ones I like the most. And originally it was Dance on a Volcano, Squonk, and Robbery, Assault and Battery, which were the 3 that I liked the most. But such a good album, like everything about this. And you know, it doesn't have Peter Gabriel on it, but I think Phil Collins really came into his own here. Such a good album, and surprised people. People did not expect Genesis to make such a good album after that. So much so that it's my favorite Genesis, more so than even Selling England by the Pound, which I think is probably a better sounding and a better album and a more progressive album. But this one has some sentiment value as well. That's why it is where it is. The next album just nudged out Trick of the Tail. I think it nudged out Trick of the Tail because Trick of the Tail's a little bit more worn out. This one's not quite as worn out, and they're pretty close. This is Jethro Tull's Songs from the Wood. From top to bottom, love them all. Songs from the Wood, Jack in the Green, and Cup of Wonder were the songs I listened to the most at the beginning. And then Hunting Girl took off, and that one is probably my favorite of all time on the album. Although in recent times, the Velvet Green and Fire After Midnight have both been very big for me. But there's no real weak sisters on this album. Or weak songs, I should say. You get away from that weak sisters thing. I don't know why I say that. I guess it's just from my childhood. Anyways, there you go. Songs from the Wood. Great kind of folky album. Folky, heavy, but also a lot of progressive elements on it. Next up, now these top 5 have been in the top 5 for God knows how long. Long enough for, I would say, at least this entire century. Maybe a good chunk of the last century too. So coming in at number 5 now. At one time it had gotten as high as 4th. Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, my favorite Sabbath album. The first one featuring Ronnie James Dio was also my first Sabbath album I owned. Really captured me and really put Ronnie James Dio in my mind. He became my favorite singer. This is a heavy album. Maybe heavier than just about any other Sabbath album in some ways. Side A is almost perfect. Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Lady Evil, and Heaven and Hell. Really solid album, side of an album. I do like the other side quite a bit. The only one that maybe I don't like as much is Lonely Is the Word. I never really completely warmed up to that song. I like it better than I used to, though, quite a bit. And this, of course, was a Martin Birch album, too, so that didn't hurt the cause. So, just a really solid album. Easily my favorite Sabbath album. Next is my favorite Rush album, Permanent Waves. This is such a great album. I loved it when it came out. I played it so much. I still love it a lot, but it's suffering from some severe burnout now, and it's starting to. I can feel it starting to waver. It could drop down quite a bit. The only song that really hasn't suffered much on this is Natural Science, which I still love a lot. The rest of them are just kind of in a mire. Maybe Jacob's Ladder, which is a song I really wasn't as big on as some of the others, is maybe coming up a bit. But Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Different Strings, all songs I liked at one time were among my favorite Rush songs. Have all just suffered the lag, the burnout. Spirit of Radio is played way too much on the radio as well. Entre Nous was a song that I liked a lot at the beginning, and it just kind of petered and stayed at a certain level and really never has changed much since then. I love the album cover. I love the whole sound and feel of this album. This is more about a sound and feel for this album than it is actually about the tracks. But it is weakening, and I can see if we were to do this again in a year or two, it might be down out of the top 10, which would be sad in some ways, but you know, that's how music grows, and that's why we keep doing it. Next up, my favorite Yes album, Close to the Edge. This is probably most people's favorite Yes album. This probably took over from Fragile sometime in the late 90s for me, and it's never been bested by anything. It's just this is actually probably the first perfect album. There is no bad songs on this. Yes, I probably like Siberian Khatru a little bit less than And You and I and Close to the Edge, but it is not really splitting hairs here, you know. Just so many good elements to this album. Some people don't like the cover, but I kind of like it. It's kind of mystical. It's kind of, you know, I think it fits the title. The title is Close to the Edge, which is kind of a mystical title, and this whole green, dark feeling, it's just kind of something mystical about it. And this was by Eddie Offord as well, so it's really quite a strong album. I can't imagine anybody who's listened to Yes at all hasn't listened to this album at least once. Yeah, just a great album. It's suffering a little bit from burnout, as most of my top albums are, but it's because there's only the 3 tracks, it's really hard for them to be completely burned out, and I don't listen to the radio, so, and these weren't really huge on the radio anyways. Okay, the next two, the top 2, the best 2, I think. Close to the Edge is getting close, but I think these two are still there. The number 2 was number 1, I would say, from about 1985 through to the beginning of COVID. So it had been my number 1 album for a good 35 years. And with a good reason. There's no bad tracks on this. In fact, most of these songs have been among my favorite songs, not just by this group, but in general for a long time. Triumph, Just a Game. Great album. I love the cover. I love the whole album. I originally liked the ones that people like. Lay It on the Line and Hold On were the 2 big ones for me. But then they kind of waned. But Just a Game has always been my favorite track on the album. Moving On has become one of my favorites on this album. I went through a period of time where Young Enough to Cry was my favorite on the album for a while, and I still like it a lot too. Fantasy Serenade is a good acoustic bit. I like those little acoustic bits thrown in there. And then Suitcase Blues is one of my favorite songs to sing in the shower. I love that song. Sing it all the time. And the only one on here, if I had to pick a weak sister on here, would be American Girls. It's not a bad tune, but it's kind of cheesy, I think, in some ways too. But so to me, it's almost a perfect album. Fantastic, Just a Game. Now in second spot, but had been in first spot for about 35 years. It's a long time. And the number 1 album, which took over, it just gradually moved its way up, and then eventually just took over, and it's suffering a bit of jet lag now, but it has probably my favorite of this group's songs on it. It's also one of my favorite songs of all time, and we're talking about this album, Styx' Pieces of 8. There's no bad tracks on this album again. Aku Aku, it's not a bad track. It's not something I listen to. It's not something I really think a lot about. It's an instrumental, but it's pretty good. Side A with Great White Hope, I'm Okay, Sing for the Day, The Message, and Lord of the Rings. Almost a perfect side. Almost. Second side, Blue Collar Man, Queen of Spades, Renegade, and Pieces of 8, and Aku Aku. Another almost perfect side. Only Aku Aku and The Message, which are little short bits, really interrupt there being absolute perfect set of songs here. But I don't mind the message or Aku Aku. They're pretty good for what they are. But the other 8 tracks to me are perfect. There's no bad tracks on this. I love everything. Queen of Spades is probably my favorite song by Styx. And Renegade, Sing for the Day is the song that I like the best by Tommy Shaw. So my 2 favorite songs by the 2 main vocalists are both on this album. I like the cover. It's almost kind of, what do they call that? Stonehenge. Anyways, great album. Number 1, Styx's Pieces of 8. So there we are. We're done. We did them all. That was long. Much longer than I had thought it would be. I'm just going to reiterate them all from top to bottom this time and then please, I've done both videos now, so list what your favorite albums are. What albums are perfect for you? What is your top level? Like, is it a master? Do you just go 1, 2, 3, or you just say this is my favorite albums? How do you do it, man? This is how I do it. I'm a very kind of structured individual that way. I like to have things in a certain way, because some people switch their favorite albums every year or two. I can't do that. Like I feel it's like I can't switch my women every couple of years. It's just feels something not quite right about it. But I'm not saying it is wrong. It's just that's the way I feel about it. So anyways, we have Styx's Pieces of 8, number 1. Triumph's Just a Game, number 2. Close to the Edge from Yes, number 3. Rush's Permanent Waves, number 4. Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, number 5. Jethro Tull's Song from the Wood, number 6. Genesis, A Trick of the Tail, number 7. Fly By Night by Rush, number 8. Ace Frehley's Solo with Kiss, number 9. Kiss Alive, number 10. BTO, or Bachman Turner Overdrive's Not Fragile, number 11. Number 12, Hemispheres from Rush. Look at Rush had 3 on the top 12, eh? That's pretty damn good, but they're such a good band. One of the, I can't imagine there being any band that I love more than them. Yes, the Yes album, great album. It comes in number 13. Number 14, Selling England by the Pound. Coming to a top 10 near you. Number 14, number 15, Fair Warning by Van Halen. Number 16, Black Sabbath's Master of Reality. Number 17, Rush's Farewell to Kings. Number 18, Minstrels in the Gallery by Jethro Tull. Number 19, Born Again, Black Sabbath. Number 20, Graceland by Paul Simon. Number 21, Equinox, or Equinox if you prefer, from Styx. Number 22, Peter Gabriel Iii. Always been Peter Gabriel Iii to me, but in recent years people have been labeling his albums according to what's on the cover, and this one would be called Melt. Number 23, a fantastic album, one of the great covers, one of the great Roger Dean albums, one of Yes's greatest albums, Fragile, featuring Roundabout. And last, number 24, Heart, Dreamboat Annie. Now I like Little Queen quite a bit too, but it never quite got to this level. I know people like it because of Barracuda, but I think this is overall a better album. Okay, there you go. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion about my masterpiece albums and why I love them so much. I love to talk about these albums because I love them all. There's all 48 of them are fantastic. They don't get to this level unless they've been at least 5 years with me. For many of them, it's been decades, and I still love them. But you know how it is, you play something too much, it gets burned out a bit, and that's why I'm doing this again, because I want to rejuvenate my interest in music. And I have a lot of fairly newer albums I've been listening to a lot more, who don't have the background yet to be master albums, but I can see a lot of them moving into this realm. So some of these albums have been up here a long time. We'll be taking a holiday, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Tell me what your favorite albums are. Tell me what you classify them. All the things I said earlier, let me know. I'm interested in knowing. So I hope you have a good evening, and this is Prog Monster saying good night, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.